Hello, this is Momma from Blessing by Design. Those are my hands there, starting off this painting for my master bedroom. I'm painting a simple canvas today with the design I'm copying directly from the pillow shams I purchased from World Market for my bed. This video is in conjunction with a blog I posted about making artwork to match your home. So head on over to blessingbydesign.com and click on our blog to learn more. First, I purchased this large white canvas at a craft store. I like the canvases that are gallery thickness, about 1.5 inches. That big blank white canvas can be intimidating, so get some color on there. I love this deep gold color. It's all over my home, and it's the color of the accent pillow on my bed. Watch as I just take generous dips into my paint color and brush it all over the canvas. I also like to paint the edges of the canvas too, so that the canvas is just completely covered and you can no longer see any of that white. Next, I'm on my computer. I use my Adobe Design software and my MacBook Pro to plan my design. I took a pic of my pillow sham from my bed that I import into Photoshop. I edit out the portion of flowers and leaves that I want to use for my painting by erasing all the extra in the image. Okay, now I'm in Adobe InDesign. It's the perfect layout program for text planning. Now, you may not have access to a fancy design software, but planning out text can be done in any textual word processing program as well. I've imported a pic of my painting of the gold canvas background. That's my bottom layer. And then the image of the portion of flowers that I erased and made in Photoshop is on top of that. I've got it where I want it. Now I've typeset my verse and I'm playing with fonts and planning where the verse will go. I'm planning on painting the letters of the verse a steel blue color that matches the flower petals in the pillow sham design. I did plan to put the verse reference in the bottom right hand corner, but eventually I opted to leave that out after I had the full verse painted. Honestly, I did this because painting text that small is quite difficult, and the font that I chose, I would have needed a lot of extra patience for that, and so I did decide to finally just leave that part out. I had first started with the page size that wasn't the same as my painting. So right here I decided to make a new document so that I could paste my layout into a page size that is the exact size of my painting. This will be important for printing out the page layout and transferring the text design to the canvas. Now I'm taking the text boxes from my actual painting size layout and placing them on documents that are 8.5 by 11, so I just have the text if I need it. So after placing all those text boxes on smaller pages, I decided what I truly wanted to do is just go ahead and print out the entire layout, the full actual size with the text and the image of the flowers and the leaves, because I decided I wanted to go ahead and trace it and then transfer the text that way. Although you can certainly just print out the text and just transfer the text portion without having the entire painting. But what I did is after I printed it out, I had to tile it, and then I had to, tiling means just printing out a really large document in several pages that are each 8.5 by 11. So after I printed them all out. I taped them together, and then I use a window as my light box. It's the best thing ever. I just hang it up, and I had hung it up flip side, so I'm looking at it backwards, but then I'm taking a pencil and I'm tracing all the lines of my flowers, my leaves, and my text. Because if I do that, I'm applying some of the pencil lead to the back side of my layout. This will then enable me to trace from the front side. And when I trace, just lightly, you don't have to press very hard. If I trace over those same edges where on the back side I had traced it, some of that pencil lead will then transfer onto my canvas. And then I've got my whole layout in really light pencil form all over the canvas. As you can see, this part of tracing my image took a long time. And so I'm speeding all the way through all this so you don't have to be bored with how I traced every single edge. And then after I removed the printed layout, I went over any pencil trace lines that were broken or that I thought might need connecting. Turns out I probably didn't need to do all that extra going over it again. I probably could have been just fine. But if you need more help, I would recommend just making sure you've got your design transferred well. When I had done this tracing, I also had taken the time to even go inside each of my leaves. My leaves have like a little shape and then they have a little highlight in the center. So I even took the time to trace that center shape. But that extra work turned out to be unnecessary. As you will see once I start painting, it's actually easier to just make the entire background shape of each leaf and not try to leave a space for the center color mark. Now on to painting. So I've mixed up my color here of the leaves. It's kind of a nice pinky red color. And what I'm going to do is I'm just really going to glob up my brush with paint. And I'm going to follow the shapes that I've created. Again, I don't have to pay attention to that middle little shape that I did. But I let the brush do the work for me. I start at the end, and rather than trying real hard, I just let the paint, because I've got so much paint on the brush, I let the paint kind of fill in along my lines. I like to use lots and lots of paint. It's much more interesting to look at. It gives it some texture. So I just follow down the lines that I've drawn here for the leaves, and I just fill in each of my shapes. Again, I don't worry about it looking like a leaf. All I'm doing is painting shapes with lots of paint there. Another advantage to having lots of paint is it goes all the way to the edges of the lines you've drawn, because sometimes it's really hard to follow a line with the exact edge of a brush, but you almost let the paint fill it in. I've mixed up my next color, which is a dark blue. And as I started painting these petals, I felt like the blue was a little bit too dark. But I'm painting in the same way that I was painting my leaves. I just glob up that brush and I just concern myself with painting the shapes, filling in my traced lines as best I can, but not really being too concerned with how neat it is, although I am being neat. Now I think I've decided that blue is just too dark. So I have decided to mix a lighter version of my paint. As you can see, the two right there, the darker one was the original color, and I've added quite a bit of white to it. Don't be afraid if you don't like something. Canvases and paint are very forgiving, especially when you're working, with big globs of paint. I like the paint. I just like the texture. But if we just go over what I just painted there, now I think that's much better. And actually it matches the curtains in my room a little bit better too, because they're more like that steel blue. So I am just going to continue filling in all of the petals for the flowers now with this lighter blue color. Now I'm going to use the same blue that I had for my petals, and I'm going to start working on my letters. Now fortunately, the font that I chose is kind of like a brushstroke font. So sometimes you'll find it interesting how I paint. It's just whatever I feel like I want to fill in first, I fill in first, and then I go back in and connect. One thing I did find that I have this easel for putting my paintings on, but when I was doing the text, I really needed more control. So in a minute here, I'm going to move to a flat surface on the table, and I'm going to continue painting, filling in my letters as best I can. Again, with a very heavy filled brush with paint, and then just letting the paint fill in all the shapes so that we can get all of our letters nicely painted. Now that I've got all of my background shapes painted for my petals and my leaves, I'm going to go in, and they're dry, so I'm going to go in on top of those shapes using that same color that I had mixed up for the leaves, which is the bright pinkish red. I use the press and seal. I don't know if you can see it in the left side there. I kind of just cover up the paint that I've already mixed up, and I just kind of lightly tap around it, so then it keeps my paint moist and won't dry out. That way, after I've given different sections time to dry, I can go back in and then use this pink color again. And just by uncovering it, that press and seal, you can also just use cling wrap or saran wrap plastic to cover it. Sometimes if it's a little circle of paint, I'll even just put a plastic cup upside down over it, and that helps keep the air out, and then the paint's usable again for later. Guess you might have noticed now that I'm at the table. My arm gets kind of tired painting up on that easel, but this is a much better way to do it. Sometimes when you're even painting, you can turn the painting upside down. There's no exact rules of how you have to do it. Just whatever is comfortable for you and for your arms and your hands. Of course, it's always good to paint left to right in order to not put your hand in wet paint. And of course, you want to have each layer completely dry in between starting the next layer. But if you notice that each of these flower petals have a little red dot in the center, so I go back in and I paint the red dot, which is so much easier than trying to paint a shape that leaves that opened for the red dot. Paint is so forgiving that way. You can just layer it, and then that just adds even more texture to your artwork. we're ready to paint these really fine stems, I have a very slender brush, and now's the time when I don't actually want a whole lot of paint. Rather than try to draw a perfect line or paint a perfect line here, what all you're trying to do is kind of give the hint that there's a stem there. So as you see, I may not even paint it all quite solidly. I'll just kind of dab in between where there's a line, where a little branch or a stem might be. But you don't want to go heavy-handed with this. You just kind of want to give a hint that there's this little bit of a stem, and actually these stems for these flowers are two lines right next to each other. But I'm not real concerned about the lines all being the same thickness. It's actually more interesting if the line is a thick, thin line and varies a bit. But what you don't want to do is just to keep going over the same line again and again. You really just want to dab here and there if you have some type of stem in your painting, especially with flowers and leaves. It's almost easier to just give a hint that there's a line there rather than trying to paint the entire stem or branch. Now I'm going to take that same paint that I was using for the stems, which is actually this darker blue that I originally mixed up that I thought was too dark. And I've decided that these flowers all need a little bit more definition. So using this same thin brush, I'm just going back and I'm tracing over each of the shapes, which when I look at the pillow sham that I'm trying to match, it has a similar treatment. It's outlining. So it's all about just looking at the lines and shapes of whatever it is you're trying to copy, and don't worry too much about what you're painting. It's just copying those lines and shapes, and you'll be amazed by the end that if you're just focusing on the colors and the shapes and the lines, you will create something that matches whatever it is you're trying to copy. A very light hand again for outlining each of these colored dots and lines within the flowers as well. Okay, well, the painting is complete. I'll just scan over everything so you can see the detail of how I've gone in there and added these little outlines for all of the shapes. Just really gives it some more depth. And this is how it looks over my bed. And I think it turned out just fine. So good luck in all of your tries at these. I'd love to hear in comments how it went for you. And thanks for watching.